Hi everyone, welcome to ELI, the place where you get your daily dose of inspiration for entrepreneurship. And today we have with us Miss Smriti Bhatt Devra, who is the co-founder of Advantage Club, which is India's largest employee engagement platform. Smriti is a graduate of University of California and was part of Y Combinator program uh, earlier this year. Hi Smriti, welcome to EL.
Hi Priya, thank you so much for having me today.
I would request you to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Yeah, so like you rightly mentioned, my name is Smriti. I'm the founder of Advantage Club. I will give a little bit of background about myself. I have done my master's from UCLA, post which I worked with Microsoft for a couple of years in their Redmond, US office. I worked there for a few years, and then me and my co-founder Saurabh, we always wanted to start something of our own. So
Mhm.
we always used to create this. List of ideas, right? So eventually we finalized on one idea, which was Advantage Club, and that's when we came back to India and started this particular venture.
Okay. Tell us about Advantage Club. What does it do?
Yeah. So Advantage Club is a global employee engagement platform. What we do is we help companies run different sorts of programs for their employees to drive better employee workplace productivity and happiness. So we run things like employee perks, rewards and recognition, different sorts of engagement, digital platforms like hobby clubs, classifieds. We also have certain financial wellness programs like early wage access and many more. So what we do is we actually digitize the entire employee benefit life cycle and bring multiple benefit programs for employees under one single platform.
Okay. Also, can you give us a perspective on why employee engagement cannot be done inside the company and why companies need to reach out to specialists in this area?
Yeah. So typically, when you're looking at any mid to large sized organization, attrition is a very big problem. You know, retaining employees and maintaining workplace happiness has become a very big problem now. I mean, gone are the days when people used to be happy to just be paid for the work they kind of do. Now you actually have to motivate them. Forget about the latest generation. Even if you look at all the young kids and millennials today, they want to be appreciated and they want to be encouraged on everything which they do. So probably a decade ago or 2 decades ago, this problem might not have been that big of a challenge. But now, with a hybrid workforce setting in, people have started to actually focus on employee engagement as a very major problem. Companies can do this themselves. In fact, when we go to any organization, they're already struggling to do this themselves because typically there is either one or two HRs in the organization who are trying to
Hmm.
manage benefits and manage employee engagement initiatives for employees over Excels and emails. What we do is we actually digitize that entire journey for them, making it easy from an employee discovery perspective to an employer management perspective as well.
Okay. I understand a big part of this initiative comes from the idea that employees or people cannot be motivated by simply from money, but there has to be additional elements for people motivation. So can you talk on that aspect on what motivates people?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things which motivates people is just actually being thanked by their managers and their peers for doing a good job. Team building is another very important thing which motivates people to be in an organization. Things for an employee to actually stick around in an organization, building a good culture and ensuring that people are being recognized for the kind of work they do has become intensely important now, because there's similar opportunities available everywhere. So salary is no longer the decision making factor for an employee because there are so many opportunities available to them.
Hmm.
So typically monetary appreciation and monetary giving money to somebody is kind of similar to giving salary to somebody, right? So it doesn't have any sort of a reason associated with it. Just like
Hmm.
if I want to recognize 30 of my employees and I go to all of them. I give them $1,000 and I tell them, good job. That's it. It doesn't mean anything because I'm saying the same thing to everybody. There
Mm,
has to be a personalized reason why I'm actually telling them that you've done a good job. I need to actually give a good citation around that. Plus, if I add monetary incentives on top of that, it then creates a behavioral change. At the same time, it also creates a sense of recognition for an employee that, okay, they are not just doing it for the sake of doing it, they're actually recognizing me for the work I do. And it also reinforces the right behavior in a positive manner.
okay. Um, One of the big challenge for any startup these days is finding quality people, and even bigger challenge is to keep them motivated to pursue the goal uh, throughout. So they usually wonder whether they should introduce any programs that are outside of the compensation, and they also wonder what portion of the entire cost per employee should go into employee engagement and these sort of programs, and not directly to the monetary. So can you, to a layman founder, can you tell a rough breakup of what portion of the cost should go into salary and what portion should go into the non-tangible aspects?
Yeah. So typically, if I look at the industry standard today, most organizations take 2 to 5% of an employee's annual CTC to be set aside as an additional money to be given to them in the form of benefits. So it's kind of it's a small portion of the salary, but then at the end of the day, you when you digitize their entire experience by giving them an award, associating certain reward points or any sort of gamification options to that particular award, the value of that particular, say, 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees kind of becomes very, very important, which is way more than giving maybe like a lakh worth of rupees of a month of salary to a person. So 2 to 5% is the industry standard.
Okay. Uh, Now tell us about the journey of building this venture. Like when did you come up with this idea, and who are the people who came in together initially to build this venture?
Yeah. So Advantage Club has been for a while now. Let me start from the beginning.
Sure.
So we're two co-founders, me and my co-founder Saurabh. We started the venture back in 2016. At that point, the reason we started the venture is, like I said, we were we always wanted to start something of our own. So we were always looking for good ideas where there is a market gap and we can actually find a product market fit. So while we were working in the US, we were both working with Microsoft at that point in time. And Microsoft had this crazy benefit program in the US. Like people used to, and they had like an amazing retention rate as well. Like people
Mhm.
used to stick around for like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. It was a very standard thing that once you go to Microsoft, you retire in Microsoft. It's and my co-founder Saurabh, he was initially in Amazon and then he moved to Microsoft. It was exactly the opposite kind of a culture there, in which the retention wasn't that high. So Microsoft had somehow built that kind of a culture that when you used to get an offer letter, they used to tell them that, okay, forget about the money which you're earning in salary, just add $10,000 additional on top of it, because you'll get so many benefits from Microsoft that all through all of the savings, you'll anyways be able to make more money there.
Mhm.
Plus, as Microsoft employees, we were treated better everywhere. We always had a privilege wherever we went, and employees were very happy with the culture overall, because it was under the Microsoft Cares initiative.
Okay.
So we used to think that this is standard in every organization, everywhere this would be there. But then we had people coming in from Microsoft India, from other parts of the country which were non-US and Europe, and we noticed that such benefit structures are actually missing when you're looking at Southeast Asia, Middle East, North Africa regions, and that entire gamut of benefit structure is missing in those parts of the countries. So with that idea, we started the venture. Advantage Club initially was started to provide a perks and a discounting kind of a program to SMEs of different organizations. While it was a very good problem for organizations, we thought that we'll bring all the small and medium companies in the country and we'll create like we'll give them the same benefits like a large enterprise would get. We realized, one, that benefits and perks is something which is not just a problem in mid and small size companies, it's also a problem in large size enterprises in India. So for anything to actually become tangible in any industry, the larger ones need to adopt it first, and then it trickles down to the smaller companies eventually. So another thing we realized is that just while the perks module worked great, and employees in HRs were really appreciating and they were really excited about it, and we were closing corporates left, right, and center, we also realized that from a market size perspective or from a problem perspective, it's not, the market is not that large. If you're looking at SMEs in the country today, they're not there today. Maybe 5-10 years down the line they will get there, but they're not there today. So then in around about the end of 2019, we pivoted to a holistic global benefits kind of a structure, in which not just focusing on SMEs and perks in India, now we do different benefit structures for organizations across the world. And COVID also helped strangely in that direction, because a lot of these programs were able to be deployed globally sitting in India itself, which pre-COVID would have been very hard to do, because you'd have to deploy physical teams in each country. So that has been our journey so far. Today, Advantage Club is live with more than 375 organizations. We have more than 10,000 brands associated with us, where you get all of these perks and reward redemption options. And we're also live in more than 65 countries. So I'd say, I think the pivot worked well for us, and we're now constantly growing 15 to 20% month over month.
Okay. That is so great to hear. Can you tell us what are the most popular services or most popular programs that most of the companies opt for while taking your services?
Yeah, so our rewards and recognition piece is of course very popular. Perks is like a no-brainer for any organization, right? If you have a gamut of services giving premium benefits and offers to employees, it is something which you will anyways take for your company. So perks is usually the foot in the door for us, for any organization. Literally, I don't think there's been any organization who's ever said that, no, I don't want these employee perks for my employees. And then rewards and recognition is also a very popular product for us, because like I said, people are trying to recognize employees over Excel's, emails, and digitizing it for them, especially now with most of the country and most of the world working from home. Cross-country awarding, recognition, collaboration, all of that has also become very popular with our recognition program. We've also recently launched an early wage access program, which is more like a salary advance feature, where you can take a portion of your salary before the payday. That has also started picking up very well. So we also see I think a great kind of ROI from that coming in the future.
Now that you have come so far, what is the way forward? What vision you have for this venture?
Yeah, so our vision is to become a platform for global benefits. So we want to become that. If you're thinking of benefits, Advantage Club needs to be synonymous with that word. That is what our end goal is. That if you want to provide any sort of recognition or any sort of benefit to any employee anywhere, we need to be that player you need to deploy. To kind of cover that vision, we try to pull in all sorts of benefits of the organization together. We integrate with their HR systems, we integrate with their even sales CRMs and everything. So we want to drive every sort of incentive or every sort of reward through the platform. Because we have created a global presence, we're also able to serve in more than 100 countries now. So we'll be continuing doing that. And of course, right now, like Advantage Club has two entities. One is we're headquartered in the US. We have our second entity in India. We're opening a third entity in the Philippines, because Philippines has now become a very large market for us with more than 100,000 users. So similarly, now we're also focused on the Middle East, North Africa, and other parts of Southeast Asia to expand. So yeah, that's where we are in terms of our visioning.
Can you tell us what are the different challenges that you have faced so far while building and growing this venture?
If I start talking about all the challenges, probably we'll take like at least 2-3 days. But I think one of the as an entrepreneur, it's a very common thing. You face challenges daily and you fix it and you move on. But there have been 2-3 major pointers which I would like to talk about. Like pivoting the business was not an easy decision for us, right? So when especially when you're getting a very good response from all your customers, and you know that this is something which eventually will become very big, but probably you need to kind of have a more bigger play to look at currently. So that was a challenge for us to pivot the business itself. Going global was also another challenge. I mean, we started going global before the pandemic itself. We started working on it initially. Of course, the pandemic kind of fast tracked that particular piece, but going global was a very big challenge, in which you had to kind of create a marketplace in more than 60, 70, 80 countries, which is again not an easy thing to do. Again, when we were starting the venture back in 2016, it was a challenge because uh, employee perks is like a chicken egg problem, right? If you don't have perks, corporates will not sign up for you. If you don't have corporates, brands will not sign up with you. So that was also a very major challenge, and we started off to fix these challenges. What we did and what we've always done is we've always acquired, like at least initially what we did, we acquired the brand piece first. We acquired our first 60, 70 brands at like almost no commission, or like very very low price, and we created that marketplace, and then we got the corporates. To go global, we did exactly the opposite. To go global, we realized that if you have the demand, the supply is easy to actually generate, and after all of these years, we've learned how to generate that supply. So we actually got the business first, and then we actually acquired the brands when we were going global. So we've actually done both sides, but we've eventually figured out these challenges as well.
What are some of the metrics that you measure on a day-to-day basis to know which direction you are headed?
Yeah. So for us, of course, we are a revenue generating business. So revenues are very very important for us, and that is like our revenue, not GMVs and all of those buzzwords which go on a lot in the startup industry. So since we're very revenue focused, for us it is very very important to grow 15 to 20% in terms of revenue month over month, and that is something we've set as a hard target for us. That's also something which we changed after we moved and we pivoted, and I think Y Combinator also helped us, help push us in that particular direction.
Mm.
So revenue metric is a very important metric for us. To actually achieve these revenues, we manage and we kind of we maintain the overall things like cohorts. We maintain cohorts are basically how many customers have started transacting in the first month, and then 6 months later how many of those customers are still transacting. We also measure, because we are a reward and recognition platform, we also measure things like redemption rates of the budgets which have been driven through the platform. Our average redemption rates are higher than 90%. Industry standard is 60%. We try to maintain that high number, so that if $1 million is being put in the system, at least 900,000 needs to be redeemed by employees in the system itself.
Mm.
We also measure budget utilization rates. If you've given certain budgets to managers, are they actually deploying that budget to the employees as well? So we try to maintain that somewhere around 95 to 99%. We also measure things like monthly active users. We measure corporate wise transactions. So all of those things are which are like major metrics for us, and then of course there are many other things which come, which I will not delve into the details right now.
Okay, that is fine. Uh, Tell us about the fundraising experience. I understand you raised funds from Y Combinator and probably raised funds after that. So how did you raise the funds, and what impact did it make to your venture prior to? So if you can compare what was your venture prior to funding and how it changed after funding.
Yeah. So in our older business model, pre-pivot, we had raised funds twice. So at that point, we were doing the perks program itself. So the first round which we had raised was kind of a initial seed or pre-seed round, if you can call it, which was kind of led by a venture fund called as Purvi Capital, and then Mumbai Angels did a syndicate with them, and then there were lot of individual angels which were there. And after that, we raised another round, which was led by Axelor Ventures, and few existing investors also participated. We've been lucky that way that a lot of our existing investors have continued participating in the future rounds. It kind of adds to the kind of conviction they have for the business, and we've always Touchwood had like a very supportive set of investors till now. Then during just while we were trying to pivot, for the pivot itself, we raised our third round, which was around about $1 million, led by Grovex Ventures, and then Axelor and other existing investors also participated in it. uh, while we were pivoting, we always wanted to become a global company, right? So that was part of the pivot, and that was part of the plan. So we thought that if we could use a global platform like Y Combinator, it would help us be there, right there in the
Mm.
global market itself, and we'd be able to position ourselves as a truly global company. So that's why we applied for YC, and luckily we got through. So when we raised, when we completed the YC batch, we have now raised another 5 million, which is a bunch of global investors from the US, Europe, Middle East, and of course in India also. There are a few funds who have invested. So that has been like our fundraise journey so far.
Okay. You mentioned that acquiring users is something that you have figured out so far. So can you tell us, sometimes to acquire users as startup, you have to deploy some growth hacks, and that really gives us a good users with less investment. So can you tell us about one or two growth hacks that you have discovered along the way, which we can learn and apply to our ventures?
Yeah. So for us, since we're a B2B kind of an organization, we have a very high network effect in place, right? So
Mm.
typically when because if you give like a good service to an organization, the HRs and the decision makers in the organization also keep switching from that company to another company.
Sure.
So 20% of our conversions actually happen via referrals. So that is one, I'd say, growth hack which we have applied, because of which conversion becomes really easy when you
Mm.
are as a decision maker, if you've experienced the platform before, or if you are hearing it from somebody who you trust and has experienced the platform before, the sales cycle and the conversion, it just shortens beyond anyone's expectation.
Mm.
So I always say that you should always, as a B2B player, you should look into your existing customer base. You should look into your data right now, that who are the customers who have kind of moved out from the system, from maybe your current organization base to another organization base. You should actively reach out to them, because that is like 100% sell. They will obviously do something with you in their new organizations as well. Because in our industry especially, when you are launching a program like that for the employees, you're kind of championing the program from an organization's perspective as well. So if the platform does well, it also does good for your own job trajectory as well. So we've had partners where our HR Spox have actually gotten awards, like multiple awards, for running the Advantage Club platform. So obviously then they also become your ambassadors out in the market.
Mm.
So you should utilize that network, and you should ensure that you're able to get more customers that way. So I think that is one growth hack we use very actively.
Okay. Uh, Now we will talk about your personal side of being an entrepreneur. Can you tell us, as an entrepreneur, you are expected to stay energetic, and uh, however, there would be instances where you feel tired, or you lose focus. and when that happens, your business might suffer as well. So can you tell us, how do you manage such situations?
Yeah. So it's not just about the business suffering. If you are tired or you are restless, it actually has a very bad trickle down effect. Like the people who look up to you in the organization also somehow get demotivated if you look demotivated yourself. And it's not an easy journey. I mean, there are a lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups, I would say. So it is really not an easy task to kind of have that game face on all of the time. But I think that's part of the job. That's something which you have to maintain irrespective of whatever it is. So a couple of things which we do is, like, me and my co-founder, we have this I don't know, we have this kind of a connection in which when one of us is down, the other one actually tries to, pull the other one up. So it has always been something in which I think co-founders need to support each other. And they are probably the people who understand the entrepreneurial journey and the problems which an entrepreneur faces more than anything else. So
Hmm.
if all of your co-founders are just down, then it just is a recipe for disaster. Secondly, what I do is, like, I meditate a lot. So if I feel that I'm stressed and I'm upset over something, I do kind of, just do a meditation session or relaxation session. It really helps. I know it sounds like a farce, but trust me, it really helps if you're able to kind of just give that 20 minutes to your brain space and just sit and relax. It really helps in solving a lot of problems.
I know. Uh, can you tell us, how do you manage your time? How does a typical day look like for you? For example, how many hours you work, how many hours do you stay on calls and all?
Yeah. So I don't think there is any time for me to work. I mean, I don't have any concept of weekends or vacations or anything. But yeah, it is important to also kind of maintain some sort of a, maybe a basic level of a work life balance, so that you can you don't get burnt out as an entrepreneur. So for me, I typically, my usual day starts with, so for us, when I go to the office, I don't think I can get anything done for the first 1 hour, because when I go to the office, there's always a set of people who are looking for a lot of help in a lot of things, and the
Hmm.
first 1 hour always goes in that direction. Then I have, since I lead sales, I kind of also am still very involved in the customer closures, especially the ones which are large and which are significant. So I have like a bunch of meetings set throughout the day. After this work from home scenario, I've been able to do like 9-10 meetings a day as well. So that has also kind of become easy in terms of doing a lot of client calls and customer calls in a day. Then there is some time spent out, and say if there is a firefighting thing to do or there is some strategy discussion to be done, we also try to maintain certain strategy meetings and strategy calls throughout the week. So there are certain days and there are certain hours in the week blocked when we only talk about how the business has gone and how we're actually looking at moving it in the future. Because one of the things with as an entrepreneur you have a challenge of is there are too many things to do, and you kind of get blocked with a lot of execution and a lot of things which are happening. So to resolve that problem, what we do is we block these weekly meetings, and maybe one week you might skip it out, but at least 3 times a month you're meeting and you are discussing the product roadmap. That's how we manage our time as co-founders. Other than that, I don't think there is a set schedule. There's always a new thing happening every day, and there's always a new challenge which we need to look at and close.
What would you say is the meaning of entrepreneurship for you? How do you define the term entrepreneur?
uh for me, entrepreneurship is like, uh, I always say that it's like a drug. It's something which is pretty addictive in nature, right? So once you become like an entrepreneur, you can't think of doing anything else in your whole life. You can't go back to maybe doing a job. You can't even go back to doing nothing. I mean, you have to always constantly be in a situation in which there is a problem and you want to solve that particular problem. I also feel that entrepreneurship is not something which you can teach to somebody. It is something which needs to come from within, because there is there is a lot of relentlessness which you need to have. There's a lot of grit which you need to have to actually drive through this hard journey, and that drive needs to come from within. And once you're able to get any sort of success in whatever you're doing, there's just no going back after that. I don't think there's anything you can do other than that, being an entrepreneur once you've become one.
That is so true. I think I'll use this punchline: entrepreneurship is a drug. Uh, my final question to you: tell us all the interesting lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur, which we can take away and apply to our lives and our ventures.
Yeah. So the first lesson which I have learned over time is that what your investor wants and what your customer wants might not be the same thing. But if you have to choose, you should always choose what your customer wants. If you are building something which your customer wants, maybe your investors don't believe in it today. Tomorrow, once you are able to demonstrate success in that, there will be a list of people who were not believing you initially, but they'll start believing you. If you start doing exactly the opposite, you build something which is maybe a buzzword in the industry or is like a hot space today, but nobody wants it. The same people who are backing you today will then come back tomorrow and say they will stop backing you, right? Because at the end of the day, if somebody is investing in you, they are here to make profits out of it. So as long as you're doing what your customer wants, make something which people want and not something which you feel that this is something which I feel people might want. Secondly, product creation and product roadmap again needs to be very, very dependent on customer feedbacks. So what we do is when we build a new product or a new feature or anything, we don't build it on our own. We pick a client who wants that particular product. We maybe discount that feature creation cost for them, but we build it with them exactly with the kind of specs which they want. And then of course that product evolves over time. What that the same thing we did with rewards and recognition, same thing we did with early wage access. Whatever programs we've built them with the customers, with their feedbacks itself. And I think third lesson which I have learned is that um, there is no such thing as success or failure in an entrepreneurship. I mean, you will fail every day, you will succeed every day. You will face a lot of rejections. You might get rejected while raising funds, you might get rejected while closing customers, but you have to continue moving on. You have to maintain that game face, you have to continue that grit. And especially with investment, I always say that you need one guy to believe in you, right? So even if like 100 reject you, it's all right. You need that one person to believe in you. And if you look at stories of Paytm, or if you look at stories of Swiggy and all of these guys, all of these founders have undergone countless number of rejections before they build these huge startups. And uh, you can't just give up because one person said that they don't believe in you. As long as you have product market fit, as long as your customers want what you're building, you should be self motivated yourself as well.
Okay. On this note, I think we are at the end of our discussion. I would say it was a great pleasure to host you, and thanks for your time, Smriti. I would say my best wishes for Advantage Club.
Thank you so much, Priya. And thank you so much for having me here. It was likewise a very good pleasure talking to you.